Irish News reporting this morning that a doctor has described how two patients begged for diazepam pills ahead of arranged punishment beatings, so-called punishment beatings from paramilitaries. This shocking story is included in a study published in the British Journal of General Practice. It features interviews with 9 GPs working in Northern Ireland's less well-off areas. None of the doctors are named in the study. None of the areas they work in are identified. Keifer McCaugherty, I hope I've pronounced Keifer's name right, is a youth worker. Good morning, Keifer.
Morning, Stephen.
Did I get your surname right?
It's close enough.
All right. So you're 25 years as a youth worker. You're involved with the campaign group StopAttacks. When I saw this story this morning, I just thought, this is not still going on, my goodness, and the desperation that you can identify with people asking for pills ahead of going to get shot. Like, it's
Absolutely.
just outrageous.
It is, and I suppose it's more for me. I suppose whenever that headline was kind of brought to my attention, my initial sort of thoughts on it, apart from ones of absolute disgust, was suppose around our failing systems of protection of people who are under threat, or people who are vulnerable or susceptible to be under threat. So although you're correct, the doctors themselves and the areas that they work in weren't mentioned, for me, I'm looking at that and going, was proper safeguarding protocols observed there? Did that doctor then make a referral on to safeguarding services that was an adult who needed to be protected?
What share with me some of your experiences of what has been happening to people.
Well, I suppose in general terms, what happens is that young people, young men in particular, and adults, they will receive a visit usually from police. Police will leave them something called a TM1 form, which is a threat management form, which indicates that there's a threat to harm them, or a threat by a group to do something to them. And they also leave them a booklet, a PSNI booklet, on how to protect themselves. And then there's meant to be a wraparound service of what protection is put in place after that. But I think the fact that whenever we actually look at the stats of this, there's a less than 2% clear-up rate of these. So with that in mind, where's the deterrent for these not to happen?
And can you talk me through some instances where, it did happen?
Yeah, there's many dozens of young men that I have worked with who have highlighted to me that police have been to their door and they've received a threat. And some of those occasions I have been able to use mediation services, and the threat has been removed or lifted or downgraded or whatever it happens to be. But for many others, that wasn't the case.
So what then happens?
Usually they are contacted. It might be a text message, it might be via messenger, it might be through another third party. They are contacted, they're given a place and a time to go. And when they arrive at that place and time, they are shot or beaten.
So they're literally turning up, and there's a group of presumably masked men with whatever it is, bats, bars, beating them up.
Yeah, it's bats, bars, or it's a gun, and they arrive to that appointment at that time. So a lot of them maybe will have a couple of drinks before it. A lot of them maybe will dose themselves full of painkillers. A lot of them are already prepared. Other families are prepared because they know too. So a lot of them already have towels ready for the blood. A lot of them already have whatever they need at hand because they know that this is going to happen.
How recent are we talking about here? Up till when? Is it still going on?
It is absolutely still going on. I know that there was much research done in one of the local papers a while ago, and that they were actually tracking it from the ceasefires and from the peace process on, and we're still in the thousands. We're in the thousands post-peace. And we know that the issue is significantly underreported. We know that beatings in particular are significantly underreported. Shootings are I suppose, a bit different, but beatings we know are underreported. The level of threats are underreported. And I'm also concerned, I know the other members of StopAttacks are also really concerned often about how these are reported, because quite often the actual report and the report either in the media or the police report will say there was an aggravated burglary on a property. But when you dig into that, the aggravated burglary is nothing stolen, but somebody assaulted badly in their home. And to us, looking at that objectively, we're looking at that and going, well, that's also all the hallmarks of a paramilitary style assault.
Are we talking about paramilitaries from both sides of the community still doing this, do you think, or what?
Well, yes, it is. I mean, this goes on in both sides. Suppose traditionally it would have been that in nationalist areas shootings were more prevalent, and in more Protestant and loyalist areas that it would have been the beatings seemed to be the hallmark, and there are variances and kind of changes in that, but it's still going on, and quite a lot of it is cited to be drugs related. But yet, when you look at all the latest police raids, when you look at all the statements out, they're all out, and a lot of the raids are all in connection with drugs and in connection with a particular prescribed groups. And then you have young people and young men brutalised for involvement in drugs. And I'm looking at that and going, this doesn't marry up in any way, shape or form.
So what are you saying?
Well, we can't have prescribed groups and paramilitary groups and criminal gangs flooding areas with drugs, and then the acceptable face of paramilitarism is punishing young people who are involved in drugs and drug trades. There's a real hypocrisy to that, and we can't have a situation where we have good paramilitaries and not good paramilitaries, and that's the system that we seem to be in.
Listen, I think there are so many questions for us to ask as a society around paramilitaries and paramilitary groups, and I think we could be asking a lot more.
Absolutely, and I think it's also, I mean, it's disguised as protection of communities. Any of these serious assaults are always dressed up as that is us protecting this community, but quite often it's not. Quite often, and from what I have observed, this is criminal gangs protecting their own empires. This is criminal gangs giving themselves status and kudos within communities and holding on to the power that they have within communities with this as a vehicle to do so. And the fact is, it's not being robustly challenged enough. It's not been robustly, nothing's been done around safeguarding and protection of vulnerable people who are under threat. And the actual deterrent in terms of how many have been prosecuted for carrying these out, it sits at less than 2%.
Have you been there face to face, Jared, with a young man? Sorry, Keifer, with a young man who, you know, they're getting ready to be shot or they're getting ready to be beaten. Have you been there?
Yeah, and I've also been there in the aftermath of it. I've quite often been the kind of first responder after that.
But can I talk about both? Can you bring it home to us? Because I think it's really important. The human fear, the humanity that you're seeing when someone knows that they're going. I can't imagine it. Someone knows they're going to be shot. Someone knows they're going to be beaten. What does that look like?
Well, I suppose that's traumatic in itself, and it's traumatic for no other reason other than it's premeditated. So this is something that they will know is coming.
That's what I mean.
They will know weeks in advance. Sometimes.
And these people are doping up with drugs to try to alleviate what they know is coming. Are they?
Absolutely. Yep. It's that, and also quite often it's trying. I've worked with lots of them who try to make sure that their younger brothers or sisters don't know that it's going to happen. And then it weighs on them that they're not sure exactly when that will happen. And they're not sure exactly how severe it will be. And quite often the message seems to be, if you show up, you'll be shot once or twice. If you fail to show up, then you can expect to be shot more often. Or you can expect to be shot 4 times or 6 times for not showing up.
That's actually the message that's delivered.
Absolutely.
It's chilling. It's chilling.
It is. Absolutely.
And it's a different world. It's a completely alien world to the majority of people listening to this.
Yeah. And it's also that there are countless demonstrable incidents where there have actually been cases of mistaken identity. There's countless demonstrable cases where they've actually been just tied into personality crisis. It's been tied into somebody wanting to retain the power and status that they have and don't like somebody standing up to that status quo. So therefore, that person is then the person who's abused.
You say you've seen the aftermath. So have you gone to the scene and been one of the first people there?
Yes, I have on several occasions.
Describe to me. Describe it.
It's just standing there whilst there is a broken boy in front of you. And quite often their parents have also been aware or know it's coming. And parents are standing there deeply traumatised as well by this and deeply upset.
I want you because my fear here is that this is going over people's heads, the reality, the brutality of it. Because this term, so-called punishment beatings, it's used too easily without us thinking what it is. So visualise it for me. You go to the scene, what do you see?
You go to the scene, there'll be a young fella in absolute distress and complete agony. And waiting on an ambulance coming, and then to be taken to hospital and in agony and lying there, and it attracts people to it, so other people are there to see what's going on and see what's happening. And because they all generally happen in the area in which you live, so everybody knows and everybody's there and everybody sees that. Then you're in hospital for several days, then you're home. And quite often then have to go for physiotherapy appointments and stuff. Whenever you're petrified to leave your area, whenever you're petrified to go anywhere, so you won't go to the hospital for physiotherapy, which then leads to further health complications as your life progresses. And that emotional scarring doesn't leave people. We have young fellas absolutely traumatised and with PTSD over this and over what's happened to them.
Well, that was to be
families destroyed.
That was to be my next question. What's your, given the experience of observing this and talking to people who it's happened to, what is the longer term mental health impact of, arriving to be beaten up or arriving and having been shot? What's it do?
It just destroys people. It destroys people. And I actually sadly know several young people who down the line then have taken their own lives because of this. So deeply impacted were they by everything else going on. And quite often young fellas with drug addictions and drug problems anyway, with already chaotic lives, with already disadvantaged in so many ways, to then be brutalised like that, and then not with no sort of support system or structure in terms of how to get over that, and how do their families get over that, and how do you live in a neighbourhood where that happens to you and everybody automatically will assume your guilt because that's happened. Because that's all the hallmarks of using the word punishment, is that people will naturally assume that you've been punished because you deserved it. And also, if you're being punished, that the person carrying out the punishment has the right to do that just by the definition of that word. Which is why StopAttacks has campaigned and pushed for the removal of that word on so many occasions over the last few years, because it isn't punishment. It's a human rights abuse.
I should have the stats in front of me. I don't. We'll get them and we'll read them out either today or tomorrow. Is this happening? I'm ignorant to this. Is this happening this year, 2024?
Yeah, there have been cases this year, and again, there is a significant issue with how many of these are being lost in investigations of aggravated burglary. So it's actually groups of men arriving to somebody's home, gaining access to their home, carrying these attacks out and severely battering people with weapons, not stealing anything, and then leaving. But somehow that's reported as an aggravated burglary. So we have so many statistics and figures being lost in that system because it's being reported incorrectly.
Has anybody been shot this year or last year?
Yeah, there have been shootings. They seem to peak and dip in terms of frequency, but the actual amount of shootings is still significantly high. And it's still there, and still an ever-present threat. I mean, young people still talk about it. Young people are still talking about this as an issue 30 years after the first ceasefire. Young people are still referencing the fact that paramilitary and criminal gangs will shoot them. And we're still in some sort of scenario where paramilitary and criminal gangs almost still have a pronounced role in terms of the internal policing of communities. And I don't know how we're still there. I don't know how we're still there where that status still exists, where there is a societal shrug, where it happens and people, whether it's a news story on the radio, whether it's something that they're reading in the paper, whether it happens to be on TV, where people hear the stories and then they shrug and move on. But this is happening all the time. And there's a threat of it happening all the time, which is why we still have the existence of mediation agencies, such as Alternatives and CRJ. It's why they still exist.
But how does that work? Right? How does it work? So you've got these sadistic thugs who, are involved in so much criminality themselves, right? And they decide that they've got some moral right within a community to shoot a young person in the knees and damage them possibly for life. They've got the authority to do this somehow. So how does it work? Who decides whether someone gets beaten up or gets shot? Who decides how many times they're shot?
They do. It's just at the whim of whoever the assailant happens to be, or whoever the actual gunman happens to be. Quite often these are at the discretion of whoever's there. There's young fellas who have been told by the gunman that they'll look after them. You'll be all right. I'll do this once, and so as if they're actually doing them a favour in that process.
Sick.
So that goes on, and quite often this is just cloaked in flags of convenience. It's cloaked in flags of paramilitary convenience. It's cloaked with that substance that says we are an organisation which is protecting this community against criminality, and everybody knows that that's not the case. Everybody knows that that is not the reality. The reality is that these are criminal organisations intent on keeping their own empires, who use paramilitary style attacks as a way of maintaining control and status in communities.
So the TM1 forms you're talking about, those are the forms that the police, they come to your door, they hand it to you if they have had what they deem as credible intelligence that your life is under threat or you're about to come to serious harm. They hand you that form, they hand you a little booklet, and off they go. On many occasions. Do you know of any instance where the PSNI know that a young person is likely to be shot or beaten up, and what they do is they set up surveillance and they follow that young person without the young person's knowledge, and they catch the people doing it? Do the PSNI ever have they?
I've never once heard of that.
Why?
I've never once heard of that.
But there's the question again. Why not?
Well, it's much the same way. I mean, the actual system now, and it's changed in the last couple of years, is that the PSNI will allocate a safeguarding detective. So a safeguarding detective will be responsible for that case. Quite often, in most cases, the young person involved isn't going to tell the police all the details around this, because that's going to have a worse sanction for them.
But that is why I've asked the question the way I have. Without that young person's knowledge, has the PSNI ever, given the fact that for to hand over that TM1 form, they are saying they believe there is a credible threat on that young person, why do the PSNI not choose one case and create a message to these thugs? Do you know what? We might actually catch you. We might actually be following this one young person to keep them safe, and that would send an incredibly powerful message, would it not?
Of course it would, but it's much in the same way as an actual protective service, which says, in your best interests and with paramountcy in mind, that we need to protect you. We need to bring you to a safe address, or we need to bring you maybe into care, or we need to do something with you. But in much the same way, if a lot of these are being arranged via mobile phone, I've never once heard of a case where the victim's phone has been taken and accessed in terms of trying to gather evidence. I've never heard of that either.
In terms of the mediation, essentially saying to these thugs, please don't shoot somebody, please don't beat someone up, as whatever. What does the negotiation contain? How do you convince these thugs not to do it?
Well, I suppose quite often some of the mediation services are really, really productive, and some of them work especially when there's situations of mistaken identity. Sometimes whenever there is scenarios where it happens to be a clash of personalities or a clash of people, the mediation services are excellent. And to be fair, they're both of the main ones are excellent at negotiating and lifting some of the significant threats as well. But there are also families and young people who have told me that they have paid not to be shot. So there is an actual cost to this, and the cost, a criminal gang can say it is X amount of £1,000 for this not to happen, and families will pay it.
How much do they get paid?
3,000, 4,000. So it actually becomes a very lucrative industry to hand out threats if you know you're going to get paid in return. And again, that's just another way of cloaking up paramilitarism and cloaking up flags of convenience to enable a criminal empire to exist.
So where do you sit in all of this, Keifer, in your group, StopAttacks? Like, what do you do?
We consistently aim to bring pressure on this issue. This was a silent issue within communities for decades. So we established ourselves a group of clerics and youth workers and academics to actually challenge this, to put a bit of pressure on this, to put a bit of pressure on the police around this, to put a bit of pressure on government departments and government agencies around this, to put a bit of pressure, to be fair, on the media too around this, around how supported. You know, so one of the things that we did was we had pushed for the removal of the term punishment attacks and for that to be replaced with paramilitary style assaults, because that's what they were. And in the last number of years, we've been moving and ramping that up again with human rights abuses and moving for those sorts of things. We have engaged with the likes of the Victoria Derbyshire programme on BBC, with the Stacey Dooley programme, anything like that can highlight this issue and bring it to the fore. Because I think you're right in saying it is quite a hidden issue, but it's quite a hidden issue unless you live in one of the communities impacted.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Look, I would sum it up like this. The majority of us, this isn't our world. So there's nobody in Northern Ireland hasn't heard the term punishment attack.
Yeah.
We all do. And the media knows it day in, day out. And we all know it. But we're just desensitised, I think, to what this actually is. This is barbarism.
Absolutely. But it's also whenever anybody hears the term, whenever I used to hear the term punishment, your instant default response in your brain is deserved. If you hear punishment, you think it's deserved.
This is one of the most thought-provoking interviews. This is one of the most thought-provoking interviews I've done in a long time. It's making me think big time.
I suppose the other thing on that, Stephen, is the amount of under 18s involved and the amount of under 18s who have been brutalised since 1994 and particularly since 1998 and when we entered a peace process here. It's the amount of young people who have been routinely abused. And we're looking at that. If that was anywhere else, that would be a huge, significant issue. But it's the fact that it's tied into the hallmarks of our past that somehow we've allowed that to be acceptable, when actually it's a massive child abuse scandal.
Keifer, I want to work with you more. I want to do more with you around this. It's really important. So thank you in the meantime. Thank you so much for coming on this morning, Keifer. All right?
Okay.
Thanks a lot. All the very best.